Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with my Ancientathon TBR. And in many ways, this is not a very strict TBR at all. Essentially, this is just going to be a pile of possibilities. I tried to keep it short because I know that June will be kind of crazy. I don't know that a lot of reading will get done, certainly not of classics, certainly not anything dense. And so I really wanted to make sure that I took it easy on myself in terms of my TBR this year. And I did really want to focus on one particular prompt. And so I think the majority of these are all going to go for that prompt, which is nonfiction. Looking back at the past couple of years of Ancientsathon, it seems like the nonfiction prompt is one that I don't tend to hit. So this year I really wanted to make a concerted effort to hit that. And I think that's probably going to work out for me because I feel like I'm kind of in general in a nonfiction mood. And so I think the majority of these are nonfiction. And one of them is my poetry prompt. I do not currently have anything for a play. I'm going to keep that kind of open. We'll just see how the month goes. Another element to constructing this TBR, this pile of possibilities, was just that I really wanted to read what was on my shelf. And so I did not want to get anything new for this because I just in general have not been reading classics this year. And so I can't really rationalize bringing any more in until I read the ones that are on my TBR shelf. And so all of these are ones that I own. The play prompt is one I've just decided to leave fairly open, and we will see where the month takes me. But let's go on and get into my list of things. So first of all, I am currently reading a book that is about the Anglo-Saxons. It is a modern nonfiction that's just looking at the history of the Anglo-Saxons. And so I am really kind of in an Anglo-Saxon Viking headspace, and I was looking at my shelves and I knew I had two things that really fit in terms of Anglo-Saxons. And so these are actually sources that have been pulled from for this modern nonfiction that I'm reading, which is by Mark Morris. It's absolutely fantastic. He's constantly quoting from these, and I just thought to myself, you know what? I know I have a copy of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, and so that's definitely on the list this year. So the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles were written starting in the reign of Alfred the Great, and they were kind of looking back on the history of Wessex, which was one of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. So some of this is kind of historiography, looking back at the beginnings of Wessex and going back and writing down what they think occurred earlier on. But a lot of it is kind of current events, writing and recording things as they are happening in Wessex. So this is a really valuable source. It is constantly pulled from. If you are in the world of Anglo-Saxon studies at all, you have to use this. The thing about it is, it's very dry. It is constructed in such a way so that each year has an entry where they tell you what went down this year. And so it doesn't really make, I think, for the best straightforward reading. And that is why I have only ever read it piecemeal and I have never read it straight through. This is really, really interesting, a really interesting addition, but I don't know that there is very good notes or in general that there is an introduction or even kind of an outro here, which I think would contextualize a lot of this, especially for the beginner to the time period. But I am really, really excited. Some years have longer entries than others because a lot went down, but I am really excited to get into this. This is one I might cheat. I might start reading this a little bit early. Also in terms of the Anglo-Saxons, I have a collection from Oxford that is just called The Anglo-Saxon World, an Anthology. So some of this is poetry, some of it is fiction, but some of it is nonfiction to my knowledge. And so this kind of encompasses a lot of what was being written during the Anglo-Saxon time period, which spanned a good half a millennium from the end of Rome in Britain in the 400s up to 1066 in the Norman Conquest. And so that's a really long swath of time and a lot was going on. And so I think this is a really interesting collection to have. It's one that I really just wanted in order to have it sitting on my shelf, in order to have it as a reference piece. But I know there are things in this anthology that I have never read, and that to me is the priority this month. I think this is going to be a really interesting collection because they do include Beowulf here. And when I reread Beowulf, I think I am going to read it in the J.R.R. Tolkien translation. So I don't think I'll read it from here if I decided to reread Beowulf this month, which I think I will not, probably. But I think when I do reread it, I would like to go for the Tolkien translation. I would just love to see how he did it. This separates things into like laws, epic poetry, religious poetry, political writing. I think the way that the anthology is set up is really nice and useful. And so I think it's probably something that would be more useful to you when you are writing something or in study. I don't think it's going to be one to read straight through, again, just like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. That's just by design not really something you want to read straight through unless you're really, really obsessed with the Anglo-Saxons. So I think this is going to be a great one to pick up here and there throughout the month, and the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is one that I also plan to do that with. I just plan to pick it up here and there. I really don't know if I will get to this next one. This next one has been sitting on my TBR for years. I really do think that I have had it since at least 2021, but it might be earlier. And that is Anselm of Canterbury's The Major Works. Anselm of Canterbury was a medieval thinker, and the majority of what he wrote was theology based. And so I have heard mixed things about Anselm in the past. A lot of people think he is very dense, that he's very difficult to read because he is, of course, very philosophical. Medieval theology is very philosophical. It's very, very interesting. But I, to my knowledge, have never read a medieval religious thinker from England before. And so I feel like that's kind of a gap in my knowledge. I really enjoy medieval literature. I really enjoy medieval theology. And so I kind of am interested to see what differentiates English theology from the continent during this time period. And Anselm is highly recommended, but apparently a lot of his essays are just incredibly dense, very hard to read, and they require a lot of, I think, background reading from you. He's constantly making reference to other things. And so I think this will be an adventure. That's the type of thing that is unfortunate for me this year. I think it's why I just haven't been reading classics, is I just don't feel like I had the energy or the time to really invest in reading a book like that. Kind of going off to the side, finding things that are referenced. I used to get a lot of joy out of that, and now I just want to read something to come down from the day, and I don't want to go into research brain. And so that's why this one is up in the air for me. I really pulled it down for the pile of possibilities just because I knew it had been sitting on my shelf for a couple of years. But this is one that I think has some pretty mixed reviews. Some people really, really love Anselm. Some people really just don't get on with him. So I'll be interested to see where I fall. Last for the options for nonfiction is one that is a very high priority for me this month, and is one in general that I am just really excited about in terms of my ancient history project this year, where I'm just reading or rereading ancient classics. I have fallen off on that in the past couple of months, honestly, and so I would really like to get back on track. And I wanted to get to this one specifically in June because it seems like every May, June, July, I go through a phase where all I want to do is read Greek mythology retellings. It just seems like this is the time of year to be reading Greek myth retellings. And so I thought I would kind of go to the baseline of some of these myths. And that is the Library of Greek Mythology by Apollodorus. This is one of the best sources we have on Greek mythology from the ancient world. And to my knowledge, I have never read it. If I have, it was in pieces here and there years ago. And so I feel like reading this will be like reading it for the first time if I've ever read any part of it. This is one of the few things we have that we can really say truly is a primary source for Greek mythology. And people have talked this up for many, many centuries. A lot of people love Apollodorus. He is consistently used as a source. And so I feel like this will be a valuable read to me in many different ways because Apollodorus is often referenced in other works. And so I personally think this is going to really benefit me. I'm really excited about this. I am also really excited about the fact that it apparently is not that long. And so I'm currently reading a Greek myth retelling. I want to read another Greek myth retelling. It feels like this would go hand in hand with my reading of current literature. So I'm really excited about this. And I think this is probably objectively of my entire list. This is the one I think I will get to, and I think it is my highest priority for the month this year. For the poetry prompt, y'all know this is always my favorite prompt. I love poetry. I love specifically medieval and Renaissance poetry. And so you know I had to put something here. And I decided to go for something long form. And I really wanted to pick an epic that I hadn't read before. In so many ways, I constantly push off epic poetry that I have not yet read because I really want to save it for later. And so this is a pretty big one. This is a pretty big gap for me in terms of epic poetry. And so I feel like it's just time to read the Lusiads. This is a Portuguese classic, and it is about Vasco da Gama's voyage around the tip of Africa. This was written in the 1500s, so it is a Renaissance classic, and I think it is in many ways Portugal's attempt at having kind of a foundation legacy type poem in the style of the Aeneid or the Iliad. And I think it's going to be very interesting on many levels. I feel like this is going to be a very layered work because I think it's going to be in direct conversation with colonialism, but I think it'll probably show a pretty positive portrait of colonialism because in the 1500s, Portugal is at the top of their game because of colonialism. So I think this is going to be interesting as a historical source and not just as poetry, but I love poetry that was published in the 1500s almost to a T. I have loved everything I have read that was published in the 1500s that was poetry. And so I feel like this is probably going to be no exception. I don't think I have ever read anything that was originally written in Portuguese. I certainly don't think I've ever read a Portuguese classic before, so I think this is going to be a first for me on many levels as well. I really do enjoy taking my time with poetry, and so if this doesn't get done this month, if it carries over into July, that is a-okay by me. To me, this just sounds really dreamy. I'm really excited about it. It has been on my TBR again for years. Most of the books that I've listed here today are books that I have seen on my shelves for quite some time, and I just think it's time that I read them and they get off that TBR shelf. So this is one I am really excited about. I have very high hopes for. If I was certain about any book on this TBR getting 5 stars, I really do think it's going to be this one. But I'm really excited about everything that I have on my pile of possibilities. I may pick up all of these, I may pick up none, you never know. And I certainly think I will fold in other things here and there. So I am really looking forward to Ancientathon this year. I think it will be far more low-key for me than it has been in years past. Please let me know in the comments if you are planning on participating in Ancientathon this year. I will link to you down below my co-host channels, Tori from Good Strong Words and David Wiley. But I would love to know down below too if you have read any of these. I would love to know what's going to be on your Ancientathon TBR, but that's going to be all from me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.